We live in an uncertain age. Nationalism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism are on the rise globally, with reactionary movements and established leaders embracing destructive and outdated ideals, recklessly pursuing narrow-minded agendas which threaten unfettered conflict, bloodshed, and societal collapse at home and abroad. When the days of imperialism seemed a faint memory for most, new reckless acts of hostility and expansion threaten to plunge the world into a state of chaos. Isolation and hatred are rapidly gaining ground against cooperation and understanding. These parochial attitudes blind individuals and whole populations to the lessons of history, lessons which teach us that the only true path forward is, as one noteworthy voice puts it, to shed our rusty armor. In light of certain concerning events, today we turn our lens on Ishiro Honda's 1963 science fiction opus Atragon. At first glance, some may be tempted to dismiss this film as dated and obscure, an inconsequential oddity which has surely lost whatever relevance it may have once had. But at the core of this forgotten gem is a heartfelt message that speaks powerfully to the volatile times we find ourselves in now. I'm Tyler Martin, and this is Monsters from the Id. At the turn of the last century, Japan was rapidly rising to prominence on the global stage as a burgeoning empire. Amid the jingoistic spirit of the times, novelist Shunro Oshikawa produced The Undersea Warship, thrilling readers with the exploits of a naval officer who, while exiled on a remote Pacific island, creates a drill-nosed super submarine which he and his crew use to advance the imperial cause. As a boy, future Toho producer Tomoyuki Tanaka had been electrified by this classic adventure and dreamed of a motion picture adaptation, which finally came to fruition in late 1963. The film, however, would differ substantially from the source material, turning the nationalistic ethos of Oshikawa's original on its head. The reimagined story is front-loaded with intrigue as magazine photographers Susumu and Yoshito find themselves thrust into a series of mysteries. The sudden appearance of a strange humanoid figure, a taxicab speeding into the ocean, mysterious kidnappings of civil engineers. At the center is a beautiful young woman, Makoto, who is being tailed by a suspicious character. She works at a shipping business headed by the former Admiral Kusumi, who took her into his care when her father, the late Captain Jinguji, left on a desperate mission near the end of the Second World War and was killed in action. However, a fishy reporter identifying himself as Umino insists that the captain, a shipbuilding genius, is still alive and hard at work on a revolutionary new submarine. Soon after, Makoto and Kusumi are nearly abducted by a man claiming to be an agent of the Mu Empire, a highly advanced civilization which once held dominion over all the world but sank beneath the sea millennia ago. Though his efforts are foiled when the photographers arrive, the Mu Empire, ready to reassert its dominance, issues an ultimatum to the outside world: cease construction of Jinguji's undersea warship, or be destroyed. To show they mean business, the Muans attack a Japanese merchant ship and trigger geologic cataclysms in Venice and Hong Kong. The United Nations sends the latest atomic submarine to seek out and destroy the undersea kingdom, but it is ultimately crushed by water pressure at extreme depth. The only hope now is Jinguji's secret weapon, if it exists. The group wonder if the man following Makoto is another Mu agent, but he turns out to be a sailor named Amano, sent by none other than Captain Jinguji to keep tabs on his daughter. Upon being pressured by former Admiral Kusumi, Amano takes them to a remote island where Jinguji and his men have indeed been working in secret since the war's end, to create an incredible new super sub, the Gotengo, or Atragon. Instead of the warm reunion she expected, Makoto is crushed when her father scarcely acknowledges her presence. Making matters worse, the captain refuses to sail for the good of the world, insisting that his ship exists for one purpose alone: restoring Japan's imperial glory. Tensions flare and the party's hopes quickly fade. Still, Jinguji welcomes his guests to witness a test run of his brainchild, a massive vessel equipped with a drill which allows it to burrow beneath the Earth's surface, as well as jets, enabling it to soar at supersonic speeds, and a beam weapon which freezes targets to absolute zero. Now, Umino, having collected the information he needs, reveals himself to be an agent of Mu, setting off a bomb to destroy the Gotengo while docked, and kidnapping Makoto and Susumu. They are taken to the Mu Empire, where they are pressed into slave labor. If they disobey, they will be sacrificed to Manda, the Muan's monstrous dragon god. Meanwhile, Jinguji and his crew manage to extricate their ship unscathed from the obliterated dock. With things having reached this pass, Jinguji finally relents, and the Gotengo sails to save Makoto, Susumu, and the world at large from the clutches of the Mu Empire. Granted a limited budget and a production period of less than 4 months, far from ideal for a movie this ambitious, Atragon clearly suffers in some areas. The crew were forced to scale back on sets and effects work for which more grandiose plans had been made. Some moments are rather ungainly, with choppy editing and a somewhat disorienting sense of awkwardness occasionally tainting the proceedings, which are nonetheless well-conceived and nicely paced. Illustrator Shigeru Komatsuzaki's design for the Gotengo is most memorable and executed with aplomb by special effects guru Eiji Tsuburaya and his team, who pull off some terrific feats despite the frustrating limitations imposed upon them. Composer Akira Ifukube is firing on all cylinders here, deftly underpinning the drama with some of his most memorable music. As usual, the maestro pulls no punches with a powerful score that hits just as hard as Tsuburaya's most vivid effects work. All of this is in service to a story bearing a very pertinent message. Director Ishiro Honda and screenwriter Shinichi Sekizawa weave one of their most interesting tales here, retooling the basic premise of Oshikawa's novel into a completely new narrative, balancing vibrant sci-fi and fantasy elements with a decidedly different direction of focus. Where Russia had been the antagonist in the source material, Sekizawa substitutes the Atlantis-like Mu Empire, which had been featured in a book by the aforementioned Shigeru Komatsuzaki. Oshikawa's exiled Captain Sakuragi becomes the war holdout Jinguji, a standout role for veteran character actor Jun Tazaki. For decades following the war, fiercely determined soldiers were found in the jungles of the former Pacific Theater, having been unaware of Japan's surrender or, like Jinguji, refusing to accept it. Director Honda, having served numerous grueling tours of duty himself, well understood the mentality of these men whose desire to serve their country had overridden their sense of reason. But unlike Jinguji and the individuals who inspired him, Honda came out of the conflict with a powerful distaste for war and nationalism, concerned instead with the well-being of mankind as a whole. Ideas that resound through some of his most notable science fiction films, but made all the more touching here, where the struggles of individuals are front and center. Honda strongly identified with the character of Kusumi, a Navy veteran who has put the war behind him and strives to use his expertise to help rebuild Japan into a peaceful and prosperous nation. Kusumi sharply chastises his former subordinate. The photographer Susumu is rather buffoonish at first, but proves to be sensitive and insightful, condemning the captain's warlike mentality with the best line in the film. Most poignantly, Makoto is bitterly disappointed that her long-lost father could be so foolish and insensitive. Makoto's comparison hits the nail on the head. When the Mu Empress, being held hostage, makes to join her people in their final fate, Jinguji readily lets her go. Despite having discarded his own rusty armor, the captain understands her devotion and tormented feelings all too well, for they are the very same sentiments he has been clinging to for far too long. It's a striking moment of pathos for both characters, and a perfect conclusion for the film. The threat has been vanquished, but instead of ending with a sense of jubilation or even relief, director Honda meditates on the unthinkable cost of victory, no less than an entire civilization, with an air of solemnity, punctuated by a moving Akira Ifukube requiem with Tsuburaya's billowing smoke issuing from a colossal funeral pyre for the untold victims of an obsolete and ultimately lethal ideology. British psychologist Steve Taylor observes that nationalism is a psychological aberration which tends to gain momentum in times of uncertainty and crisis. Such circumstances make it all the easier to fall into the traps of isolationism and misguided group identity. Jinguji, seeing that his country's cause is doomed, refuses to surrender and goes into seclusion, working in secret to create a weapon to help Japan reclaim her former glory, a glory she no longer desires. The Mu Empire, having caught wind of Jinguji's deadly weapon, the existence of which could spell their doom, violently lash out in a campaign of destruction to reclaim their former glory, spelling doom for us all. Both cases exemplify a deadly and outmoded way of thinking that has nevertheless gained traction in the increasingly volatile atmosphere of today. As Honda so eloquently insists, it is only by discarding such rusty armor that we can find ways to forge ahead as individuals and as a global society. No matter how troubled our times may seem, no matter how threatened we may feel by the world around us, isolating ourselves and resorting to nativism and xenophobia is not the answer. Striking out against our neighbors and seizing whatever we like to demonstrate the perceived righteousness of our cause is not the answer. History has shown time and again that such paths will ultimately lead to ruin. Still, all too aware of their allure, certain unscrupulous individuals continue to exploit these sentiments for selfish gain, as no doubt they will continue to do for as long as they are able. But we must not bow to these baleful voices, no matter how powerful or persuasive they may seem. For every one of us possesses the one thing these people fear most, the ability to choose, to work not merely for our own selfish interests, but for the good of one another. Every Jinguji who sheds his rusty armor with an eye to the well-being of his brothers and sisters helps to make the world a safer, wiser, and much better place. It is he who realizes that we must turn from our errors, but also learn from them, lest the ghosts of the past hold us back from forging ahead into a brighter future. Today, the world finds itself faced with this very choice. The stakes could not be higher. Let us choose wisely. If you've stuck around this long, thank you. In case you couldn't tell, I hold a strong personal affinity for Ishiro Honda and the principles he held dear, and the topics discussed today hit especially close to home given the current circumstances. This matter has been weighing heavily on me lately, and I hope I've gotten the message across. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more Monsters from the Id. As ever, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.